The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had never seen such tension. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center of the circular chamber, surrounded by towering figures from 12 different worlds. Their eyes bore down on him with mixtures of fear, anger, and disgust. The air itself seemed heavy with the weight of their judgment. Jake had fought in 3 wars for these same aliens. He had saved their colonies, protected their trade routes, and lost good friends defending their principles. Now they looked at him like he was some kind of dangerous animal that needed to be caged. The Saurian counselor Vextar rose from his elevated seat, his reptilian features twisted into what passed for a sneer among his people. "Captain Morrison," he hissed, his voice carrying through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "You stand here representing a species that has become a threat to galactic peace." Jake kept his face calm, though his hands wanted to clench into fists. "With respect, Counselor, humanity has done nothing but serve this council faithfully for, nearly 200 years. Serve?" Vextar's laugh was like glass breaking. "Your people have infected every corner of our galaxy with your aggressive ways. Your colonies expand faster than any other species. Your technology advances at a rate that threatens the natural order." Dr. Lisa Carter stepped forward from behind Jake. She was small compared to most of the alien representatives, but her voice carried clearly. "Our expansion has always followed Council guidelines. Our technology has been shared freely with all member species. How is progress a crime?" The Centauran delegate shuffled his papers with forearms, never looking up. "The humans have introduced concepts that disrupt traditional hierarchies. Their notion of individual merit over species rank threatens stability." Jake felt his patience wearing thin. "You mean we actually promote people based on ability instead of what planet they were born on?" A murmur ran through the chamber. Several of the smaller species representatives shifted uncomfortably. Jake knew some of them agreed with him, but they would never speak against the old powers. Vextar's eyes narrowed. "This is exactly what we mean. Your arrogance. Your assumption that your way is better than systems that have maintained peace for millennia." "Peace?" Dr. Carter's voice rose slightly. "What about the Corvin uprising 3 years ago? Human negotiators ended that conflict. In weeks after your traditional methods failed for months. The asteroid pirates?" Jake added. "Human ships stopped their raids when Council forces couldn't even find them." "Enough." Vextar slammed his clawed hand on his podium. "You prove our point with every word. Humans always believe they know better. Always pushing, always changing, always disrupting." Admiral Ben Rodriguez had remained silent until now. The grizzled veteran stepped forward, his uniform bearing ribbons from dozens of campaigns. "Counselor Vextar, I've served alongside representatives from every species in this chamber. I've bled with them, fought beside them, saved their lives, and had mine saved in return. We're not asking to lead anyone. We just want to continue serving the galaxy we've sworn to protect." The Altarian representative, Counselor Zethkri, spoke for the first time. His melodic voice seemed genuinely sad. "Admiral Rodriguez, no one questions human bravery or dedication. But your species' rapid development concerns many of us. In 2 centuries, you've achieved what took most of us 2 millennia. Is that our fault?" Jake asked. "Should we have deliberately slowed down our progress?" "Perhaps," Vextar said coldly. "Perhaps that would have been wisdom." Dr. Carter pulled out a datapad. "I have records here of human contributions to galactic science, medicine, and culture. We've helped cure the Rigelian plague, developed new farming techniques that ended famine on 6 worlds, and our artists have enriched culture across dozens of systems." "Your artists," the Centauran delegate said with distaste, "encourage individualism and rebellion against proper authority." "God forbid people think for themselves," Jake muttered. Vextar's head snapped toward him. "There it is again. That human arrogance. That belief that your way of thinking is superior to traditions established long before your species discovered fire." The chamber fell silent. Jake realized this wasn't really a trial. The decision had already been made. This was just theater. a way for the Council to justify what they'd already chosen to do. Admiral Rodriguez seemed to reach the same conclusion. What exactly are you proposing, Counselor? Vextar stood to his full imposing height. The Galactic Council has voted. Humanity is hereby expelled from galactic civilization. All human colonies beyond the Sol system must be abandoned. All humans must return to Earth within 30 standard days. A quarantine barrier will be established around your system. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. You're exiling an entire species because we make you uncomfortable? We are protecting galactic stability, Vextar replied. Your people can live in peace in your own system, but you will no longer be permitted to influence the rest of the galaxy. Dr. Carter's voice shook with controlled anger. This is insane. You're cutting yourselves off from one of your most productive member species out of fear and jealousy. The decision is final, Vextar said. Security will escort you to your ship. As they walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime, Jake noticed how the alien staff and visitors avoided looking at them. Word had already spread. Humanity was now officially unwelcome in the galaxy they had helped build and defend. Admiral Rodriguez walked beside him, his face unreadable. Admiral, Jake said quietly, what do we do now? Rodriguez was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled grimly. We go home, Captain. We go home and we prepare. Prepare for what? For the day they realize they've made the biggest mistake in galactic history. As their ship lifted off from Nexus Prime, Jake watched the seat of galactic government shrink below them. Dr. Carter sat across from him, already working on her datapad. What are you doing, Doc? Sending messages, she said, without looking up. Warning our people in the outer colonies. Some of them might choose not to come home just yet. Admiral Rodriguez nodded from the pilot's seat. Smart thinking. We're going to need eyes and ears out here. Jake stared out at the stars, thinking about the friends he'd served with, the battles they'd fought together, the trust they'd built over decades. They're going to regret this, he said. Maybe, Rodriguez replied. But by the time they do, it might be too late for regrets. The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying the last official human representatives away from the galaxy they'd called home for 2 centuries. Behind them, the Galactic Council settled into what they believed would be a new era of stability and order. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. 5 years had passed since the Great Exile, and the galaxy had settled into what the Council believed was perfect peace. The older species congratulated themselves on removing the disruptive human element from their careful order. Trade flowed. Along established routes, conflicts were resolved through proper channels, and no one challenged the ancient ways of doing things. If only they had looked closer. Commander Amy Foster adjusted her Altarian identity papers as she walked through the bustling market on Kepler Station. To anyone watching, she was just another trader from the Outer Rim, conducting routine business. Her synthetic skin had a slight blue tint, and contact lenses changed her eyes to the proper Altarian golden color. 5 years of practice had perfected her disguise. She wasn't alone. Scattered throughout the galaxy, nearly 10,000 humans lived under false identities. They worked as mechanics, doctors, teachers, and traders. The Council believed all humans had returned to Earth. But Commander Foster's network had other ideas. The shipment from Vega arrived this morning, her contact said in the coded language they'd developed. He was actually reporting on Saurian fleet movements near the frontier. Good quality? She asked, which really meant asking if the ships looked ready for combat. Poor maintenance, old equipment, he replied. The Saurian fleet was falling apart from lack of proper upkeep. Amy nodded and moved on. This was how intelligence flowed through her network, disguised as normal business talk, passed from station to station until it reached Earth. The Council had no idea they were being watched by the very people they'd exiled. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, Dr. Peter Grant stared at his latest test results with amazement. The quantum resonance chambers were working beyond his wildest hopes. Without access to galactic technology, humanity had been forced to find new solutions to old problems. Sir, his assistant called from across the lab. The Mars facility is reporting another breakthrough in the manufacturing process. Peter smiled. The exile had done something the Council never expected. It had forced humanity to stop relying on alien technology and start truly innovating. Cut off from galactic trade networks, humans had learned to make everything they needed from asteroid mining and advanced recycling. What about the communication array? Peter asked. Online and testing perfectly. We can now talk to any human settlement instantly without using galactic relay stations. That was the key breakthrough. For centuries, faster-than-light communication had required the massive relay networks built and controlled by the Council. Now humans had their own system, completely separate and undetectable by alien technology. The workshop door opened and General Kate Murphy walked in, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. Dr. Grant, I need a status report for the Defense Committee meeting. Peter pulled up his files on the holographic display. We're ahead of schedule on all major projects. The new ship designs are ready for prototype testing. The plasma weapon systems exceed all expectations, and the AI integration is working better than we hoped. General Murphy studied the data. These power readings can't be right. They are. Without Council restrictions on weapons research, we've made incredible progress. Our new ships will be faster, stronger, and smarter than anything in the galaxy. The General nodded grimly. Good, because we're going to need them. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Ron Blake finished loading his cargo ship with what appeared to be simple trade goods. In reality, his hold contained the most advanced surveillance equipment humanity had ever built. His job was to slip through the outer systems, gathering intelligence on threats the Council was too blind to see. Blake had been a smuggler before the exile, running supplies to human colonies on the frontier. Now he worked for Earth's intelligence service, using his old skills and contacts to gather information the official channels missed. His latest mission had taken him to the Galactic Rim, where he'd made a disturbing discovery. Strange ships had been spotted in the dark spaces between stars. Ships that didn't match any known design. When he'd tried to investigate, his sensors had been scrambled by technology, unlike anything in the galactic database. Blake transmitted his report through encrypted channels, knowing it would reach Earth within hours thanks to Dr. Grant's new communication network. What he didn't know was that similar reports were coming in from a dozen other sources. Commander Foster received the consolidated intelligence report while sitting in a cafe on Nexus Prime itself. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was reading classified information about threats to the galaxy while sitting a few kilometers from the Council chambers that had exiled her people. The reports all told the same story. Unknown ships were probing the outer systems. Trade vessels were disappearing without distress calls. Frontier colonies were going silent. And the Council's response was typical: form a committee to study the situation. Amy encoded her own report and sent it through the network. Earth needed to know that the galaxy was facing a threat, and the leaders who had exiled humanity were completely unprepared to handle it. Back on Earth, Admiral Ben Rodriguez read the intelligence reports with growing concern. The unknown ships, the missing colonies, the probe attacks, it all pointed to one conclusion. Someone was preparing to invade Council space. How long do we have? General Murphy asked during their emergency meeting. Unknown, Rodriguez replied. But based on the pattern of probes, I'd say months, not years. Dr. Grant looked up from his datapad. The new fleet will be ready for trials next month. If we push the construction schedule, we could have 50 ships operational within 6 months. Do it, Rodriguez ordered. And expand the program. I want every shipyard in the system working around the clock. General Murphy frowned. Admiral, are we really planning to intervene? The Council exiled us. Why should we help them? Rodriguez stood and walked to the window overlooking Earth's orbital shipyards. Massive construction projects filled the space around the planet. New ships unlike anything ever built, using technologies the galaxy had never seen. Because, he said quietly, when this threat comes, it won't stop at the Council's borders. Whoever these invaders are, they'll come for Earth eventually. Better to stop them while we have allies, even if those allies don't know they need us. Yet. Dr. Grant nodded. The exile forced us to become stronger. Maybe that's exactly what we needed. Maybe, Rodriguez agreed. But the Council doesn't know what they're facing. Their military hasn't fought a real war in centuries. Their technology hasn't advanced in decades. They're soft, comfortable, and completely unprepared. General Murphy smiled grimly. Unlike us. Unlike us, Rodriguez confirmed. 5 years of exile have made us harder, smarter, and more dangerous than we've ever been. When the time comes, the galaxy will learn that exiling humanity was the biggest mistake in galactic history. In the depths of space beyond the rim of known territory, massive ships moved through the darkness. The Drakari Empire had waited centuries for this moment. They had studied the galaxy's defenses, identified its weaknesses, and planned their conquest down to the smallest detail. Their only concern had been the humans, the unpredictable species that might have disrupted their careful plans. But the galaxy had solved that problem for them. The humans were gone, exiled to their home system. The way was clear. The invasion could begin. They had no idea what humanity had become in exile. That would be their first mistake. It would also be their last. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called in the middle of the night. Councillor Vextar arrived at the chambers to find chaos. Representatives from 3 different species were shouting at each other while emergency broadcasts played on the main screen. Order! Order! The Centauran speaker banged his gavel with all 4 arms. Report from the Outer Rim. Admiral Kexalon of the Saurian fleet stepped forward, his usual arrogance replaced by barely controlled panic. 3 systems have gone dark in the past week. Vega, Kepler, and New Rigel. No distress signals, no survivors, nothing. What do you mean, nothing? Vextar demanded. I mean the planets are empty, cities abandoned, ships missing. It's like entire populations just vanished. The chamber erupted in frightened voices. Councillor Zethkri, the Altarian representative, stood slowly. Admiral, what about the defense fleet stationed in those systems? Admiral Kexlon's silence was answer enough. Gone, he finally admitted. We found wreckage from the Vega defense, fleet scattered across 3 solar systems. The ships were torn apart by weapons we don't recognize. The main screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage from a deep space probe. Strange ships moved through the darkness, organic-looking, vessels that seemed to pulse and shift like living things. As they watched, one of the alien ships fired a beam of energy that passed right through a Council destroyer's shields as if they weren't there. By the ancestors, someone whispered. Vextar studied the images with growing dread. How many ships? The probe counted at least 200 in that fleet alone. Intelligence suggests there are more fleets moving through dark space toward the inner systems. The Centauran speaker's 4 hands trembled as he processed the data. What do we know about them? They call themselves the Drakari. That's all we've learned before our scouts were destroyed. Far from the panic in the council chambers, Commander Amy Foster watched the emergency broadcast from her hidden apartment on Nexus Prime. Her human features were concealed behind an Altarian disguise, but her eyes burned with intensity as she absorbed the information. She activated her encrypted communicator. Network Alpha, this is Raven, priority transmission to home base. Within minutes, her report was racing through the human communication network toward Earth. The Drakari weren't just probing anymore. They were attacking in force. On Earth, Dr. Nicole Hayes finished reading the latest intelligence reports with a sick feeling in her stomach. She'd been studying the Drakari for months, analyzing every scrap of data the human spy network could gather. Colonel Mitchell, she called to the man reviewing tactical displays across the lab. I need to show you something. Colonel Ryan Mitchell walked over, his enhanced physique moving with fluid grace. The exile had allowed humans to push the boundaries of genetic enhancement without council restrictions. Mitchell and his special forces teams were faster, stronger, and smarter than baseline humans. What did you find, Doc? Dr. Hayes pulled up her analysis on the holographic display. The Drakari have been watching the galaxy for decades. Look at this attack pattern. The display showed the invasion routes overlaid with historical data. They're not just randomly attacking. They're targeting specific systems based on old galactic defense plans. Mitchell studied the data. They've been planning this for years. Longer than that. But here's the really disturbing part. Hayes highlighted another section of data. According to intercepted communications, they were waiting for something specific before attacking. What? The removal of humanity from galactic defense. They identified us as the only species with the tactical flexibility to counter their adaptive technology. Mitchell's jaw tightened. They waited for the Council to exile us. Exactly. The Council didn't just remove their most effective military force. They did it at the exact moment when that force would be most needed. Meanwhile, in the Council chambers, the situation was getting worse by the hour. Admiral Kexalon reported that 2 more systems had fallen to the Drakari advance. The alien ships seemed to learn from each battle, adapting their tactics and technology to counter whatever the Council forces threw at them. Their shields adjust to our weapons, Kexalon explained. Their hulls repair damage faster than we can inflict it, and their tactics, it's like they know what we're going to do before we do it. Counselor Zethkri spoke quietly. Perhaps we should consider alternative approaches. Vextar's head snapped toward him. What do you mean? I mean, Zethkri said carefully, that we may have made an error in judgment 7 years ago. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what he was talking about, but no one wanted to say it. You're suggesting we contact the humans? The Centauran speaker's voice was barely a whisper. I'm suggesting we consider all options, Zethkri replied. The humans always found unconventional solutions to military problems. Vextar's eyes blazed with fury. Never. We will not crawl back to those arrogant primitives begging for help. Then how do you propose we stop the Drakari? Zethkri asked. Vextar had no answer. In the Sol system, Admiral Sam Davis stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and most advanced warship. The vessel was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Sleek, adaptive, and bristling, with technologies that pushed the boundaries of known science. Status report, he ordered. All systems optimal, Admiral, his tactical officer replied. The new adaptive armor is responding perfectly to test scenarios. Weapon systems are operating at 120% of design specifications. Davis nodded. The 7 years of exile had given humanity time to develop technologies the Council couldn't imagine, ships that could repair themselves, weapons that learned from each shot, and most importantly, tactical doctrine that embraced chaos instead of fearing it. Admiral, his communications officer called out, we're receiving a priority transmission from the spy network. Davis read the report with grim satisfaction. The Drakari were accelerating their advance. 3 more systems had fallen, and their fleets were moving toward the core worlds. The Council's forces were being systematically destroyed by an enemy they couldn't understand or counter. Sir, his tactical officer said quietly, the government is asking for your recommendation. Davis looked out at the fleet assembled around Earth. 50 ships of revolutionary design, crewed by humans who had spent 7 years preparing for exactly this moment. The Council had exiled them to prevent them from disrupting galactic order. Now that same order was being destroyed by forces the Council couldn't handle. Send a message to the fleet commanders, Davis ordered. Begin final preparations. We move in 72 hours. Sir, the Council hasn't requested assistance. Davis smiled grimly. They will, but by the time they swallow their pride enough to ask, it may be too late. We're not going to wait for an invitation to save the galaxy. On Nexus Prime, Counselor Zethkri sat alone in his office, staring at a secure communication device he'd acquired through back channels. It was tuned to frequencies the human spy network used. One call could open communications with Earth, but making that call would be admitting that the Council's greatest decision had been its greatest mistake. It would mean acknowledging that the species they'd exiled in fear and pride was the only hope for galactic survival. Outside his window, refugee ships streamed toward the inner systems, carrying survivors from the Drakari advance. How long before those ships stopped coming? How long before the Drakari fleets appeared in the skies of Nexus Prime itself? Zethkri's hand moved toward the communicator, then stopped. Not yet. The Council still had options. They could still handle this themselves. Couldn't they? In the darkness between stars, the Drakari fleets moved closer to their ultimate goal. They had waited centuries for this opportunity, and everything was proceeding according to plan. The galactic defenses were crumbling, the Council was paralyzed by fear, and the only species that might have stopped them was trapped in their home system. Victory was within reach. Soon, the galaxy would belong to the Drakari Empire. They had planned for every contingency except one. They had no idea what humanity had become during 7 years of exile. That oversight would soon prove fatal. The Drakari fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system, like a swarm of mechanical locusts. 200 bioships pulsed with alien energy as they began their final approach to the heart of galactic civilization. Behind them, Nexus Prime burned with the light of desperate defense preparations. Counselor Vexitar stood in the command center, watching his worst nightmare unfold on the tactical displays. The Council's combined fleet, what remained of it, formed a defensive line between the Drakari and the planet. It wasn't nearly enough. "How long until they reach us?" he asked. Admiral Kexlon's voice was hollow with defeat. 6 hours, maybe less if they maintain current acceleration. The Council chambers had been evacuated. Thousands of ships fled the system carrying refugees and government officials. But Vextar had stayed. If this was the end of galactic civilization, he would face it here. "Sir," a communications officer called out, "we're detecting new hyperspace signatures." Vextar turned to the display, expecting to see more Drakari reinforcements. Instead, his eyes widened in shock. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace behind the Drakari fleet, but these weren't alien vessels. They were human. Fleet Admiral Chris Parker stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the Drakari formation through tactical displays that showed details no galactic ship could detect. 7 years of technological development had given humanity sensors that could penetrate Drakari stealth systems and adaptive shields. "Captain Santos," he said to the Liberty's commander, "take us into battle formation." Captain Maria Santos smiled as her ship's systems came alive around her. The Liberty was humanity's masterpiece, a vessel that could adapt its configuration in real time, shifting from exploration mode to combat configuration in seconds. "Admiral," she said, "the fleet is ready. All ships report green across the board." Parker nodded. 50 ships against 200 seemed like impossible odds. But these weren't ordinary ships. Every vessel in the human fleet incorporated technologies the Council had never imagined. More importantly, they were crewed by humans who had spent 7 years preparing for exactly this moment. "Open a channel to the Council fleet," Parker ordered. On Nexus Prime, Vextar stared at the communication request in disbelief. After 7 years of exile, humanity was offering to help the people who had banished them. "Admiral Parker," Vextar said when the channel opened, "what are you doing here?" "Saving the galaxy," Parker replied simply. "Your fleet needs to pull back and let us handle this." "You have 50 ships against 200, Vextar protested. "This is suicide." "Trust me," Parker said. "We know what we're doing." The Drakari fleet had detected the human ships and was already adapting. Their biovessels began to shift configuration, preparing weapons that had already proven devastating against Council forces. Captain Santos watched the enemy movements on her tactical display. "They're adapting to standard galactic weapon signatures." "Good," Parker said. "Dr. Lee, are the adaptive systems online?" Dr. Kevin Lee looked up from his engineering station with a grin. "All weapons are ready, Admiral. The Drakari are about to learn that we don't use standard anything." The first exchange of fire lit up space like a deadly light show. Drakari bioships launched energy beams that should have overwhelmed human shields. Instead, the beams seemed to slide off the human vessels like water off glass. "Adaptive shielding is working perfectly," Santos reported. "Their weapons can't lock onto our frequency." The human response was devastating. Plasma cannons fired bursts of energy that shifted frequency with each shot. Every time the Drakari ships adapted to one frequency, the next shot used a completely different one. Dr. Lee watched his screens with satisfaction. Their adaptation systems can't keep up. They're designed to counter static technology, not weapons that evolve faster than they can analyze. The Drakari fleet commander had never encountered anything like this. For centuries, they had conquered galaxy after galaxy using their adaptive technology. Every species they faced used predictable weapons and tactics that could be countered, once analyzed. But these humans were different. Their ships changed configuration mid-battle. Their weapons shifted frequency with every shot. Their tactics seemed to embrace chaos rather than order. A human ship would charge directly into Drakari formation, only to suddenly split into 3 smaller vessels that attacked from different angles. Another would appear to retreat, then reveal that it had been laying a trap the entire time. Captain Santos pushed the Liberty through maneuvers that should have been impossible. The ship's adaptive hull shifted and flowed, absorbing impacts and redirecting energy. When Drakari bioships tried to ram her vessel, she simply flowed around them like liquid metal. "This is incredible," she told her crew. "The ship is responding to thoughts as much as commands." The battle turned into a masterclass in human warfare. Where the Drakari expected rigid formations, humans provided fluid chaos. Where they expected predictable responses, humans improvised solutions that defied conventional wisdom. Colonel Ryan Mitchell led boarding parties onto damaged Drakari ships, his enhanced teams moving through alien corridors with deadly efficiency. The Drakari had never faced opponents who could adapt faster than their own technology. "Their bioships are learning," Mitchell reported over the combat net. "But we're learning faster." The tide of battle shifted dramatically when Dr. Lee activated his most ambitious creation. The human ships suddenly networked together, sharing information and adapting as a single organism. The Drakari found themselves facing not 50 individual ships, but one massive learning entity that grew stronger with every exchange. "Impossible," the Drakari fleet commander transmitted in his own language. "They adapt faster than us." Admiral Parker smiled grimly. "That's because adaptation is what we do best." On Nexus Prime, Vextar watched in amazement as the human fleet systematically dismantled the Drakari invasion force. Ships that had seemed unstoppable were being outmaneuvered and destroyed by vessels a fraction of their size. "How are they doing this?" Admiral Kexlon whispered. Counselor Zethkri, who had joined them in the command center, spoke quietly. "Because we forced them to become something greater than they were." The final phase of the battle was swift and decisive. The remaining Drakari ships attempted to retreat, but the human fleet pursued them relentlessly. Captain Santos led the chase, her ship flowing through space like a predator hunting wounded prey. "Should we let them escape?" she asked Admiral Parker. "No," Parker replied firmly. "They came here to destroy galactic civilization. We're going to make sure they never get the chance to try again." The last Drakari ship exploded in a brilliant flash of energy. The threat that had seemed unstoppable was completely eliminated in less than 4 hours. In the aftermath, Fleet Admiral Parker's image appeared on screens throughout Nexus Prime. The man who had been exiled 7 years ago now stood as the savior of galactic civilization. "The Drakari threat has been eliminated," he announced. "But let me be clear about something. We didn't come back to rejoin your council. We came because it was the right thing to do." Vextar found his voice. "Admiral, the council would be honored to restore humanity's membership." Parker shook his head. "With respect, Counselor, we're no longer interested in membership. We're establishing the Terran Commonwealth, a voluntary alliance based on merit and mutual respect, not species hierarchy." Within days, representatives from dozens of species arrived at Earth to discuss joining the Commonwealth. The younger species came first, followed by some of the older ones who had grown tired of the Council's rigid traditions. Counselor Zethkri was among the first to sign a treaty with Earth. "You could have let us fall," he told Admiral Parker. "After what we did to you, no one would have blamed you." Parker smiled. "That's not who we are. Yes, you made a mistake when you exiled us, but that mistake made us stronger. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to someone is being forced to prove they're better than others think they are." The old Galactic Council still existed, but it was no longer the dominant power in the galaxy. That role now belonged to the Terran Commonwealth and its growing alliance of species who believed in progress over tradition. Vextar, older and wiser than before, eventually admitted the truth to himself. Exiling humanity hadn't been about protecting galactic stability. It had been about fear. Fear that humans would show everyone there was a better way to live. They had been right to be afraid, but for all the wrong reasons. The galaxy was indeed changing. But instead of the chaos the Council had feared, humanity brought something even more dangerous to the old order. Hope that things could be better than they were, and that more than any weapon, was what would reshape the galaxy forever.